Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of Beyond the Bar podcast. I'm your host, Denise Tova. And today, and I always say that, but I really mean it. I am really, I am really jazzed to be joined by Gus Dimopoulos. He's a dynamic attorney who specializes in matrimonial law, but he's got such an awesome energy about him. And his journey from Fordham Law graduate to a highly regarded attorney and really complicated divorce cases. It's really nothing short of inspiring. And with his background that really includes working at some of the largest law firms, receiving mentorship from experienced lawyers, he brings wealth of knowledge to his clients and unique perspective and practical approach to the law. So I am excited to delve into his story beyond his professional title. Gus, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Denisa. Thank you for those kind words. I appreciate it.
So your journey is really interesting. Share with me what it was like growing up in Queens, in a Greek immigrant family, and how has that experience shaped your career path?
Well, the first few years of my life, we were in Astoria, Queens, like every other Greek family. Um, Typical upbringing, cousins down the block, grandmother around the corner, and my father was a house painter and did a lot of work in Westchester, and decided for some reason that he should try to move us all up to Westchester because he wanted a better education for his kids and the typical story. Um, and he managed it. And I think I was 5. We moved up. I have 2 older sisters, and we moved to Scarsdale, which, for
Mm.
those of you who don't know, is about as far away from Astoria, New York, as you can get, both figuratively. Oh, well, not literally, but figuratively. It is a upper middle class, highly educated community, and there we were. So it was incredible. I mean, I went from, kind of, it was a little kid, so I don't remember too much of it, but I do remember going back to seeing family in Queens and around the boroughs when I was already living in Scarsdale and thinking, my God, like, I'm incredibly lucky to be here. Like, this is, beautiful house, tree line block, and the education was incredible. The people were amazing and fortunate. So it was a great upbringing.
Hmm. Yeah, I was. Were you first? So your first generation immigrant? Were you born in the U.S. or
I
in
was born
Greece?
here. Both my father and my father's born in Kalamata, Greece, where the olives are from and famous for, and my mom's from Cyprus, which you know you could argue about whether it's Greek or Turkish, but the Greeks say it's Greece. And they both immigrated here, and I was born here, but raised very much. I didn't speak English until I was 4,
Mm.
and in fact was parents got chastised by my kindergarten teacher that I was apparently, and as it's relayed, reciting the alphabet in Greek, which didn't go over well.
Do you still speak it?
Sure, sure, sure. And my wife is Greek, so we uh, somehow messed up and didn't teach our kids how to speak Greek. But in the end, it's brilliant because we could talk about the kids and have private conversations without them knowing
There you
anything.
go. There you go. Yeah, that was me actually in Czech. It was same thing. That is an advantage. So how did you become a lawyer? How and why did you become a lawyer?
I became a lawyer, I think, for kind of typical reasons, right? Outgoing person. Um, I always found my way um, into debate, whether it was conversations with friends or family. I just always liked to have those conversations. And you heard, oh, you should be a lawyer. Oh, you have a big mouth. You should be a lawyer. Oh, but so it was always in the back of my mind. I think some of my typical liberal arts education, poli sci, and I took a few classes that just really got me kind of went from being hearing, oh, you should be a lawyer to wait, this is actually really neat. But I
Mm.
always wanted to be in a courtroom. Um, and one of the biggest difficulties I had early on was I saw no avenue to get there. I mean, going to a big law firm, I didn't even see the outside of an office, much less a courtroom. And the people that were going to trial in these incredible, multi-billion dollar cases, that wasn't going to be me anytime soon. Um, so I knew I wanted to be in a courtroom. I just didn't know how to get there.
Why did you think that wouldn't be you? These multi-million dollar cases.
You know, I don't want to criticize them because millions of people work there and make great livings and they do important work. Um,
Yeah.
but I think you have to convince yourself that you're going to spend many, many years in a slog, um, getting to that point. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Hard work's great. But if I could tell you the work that I was doing early on in my law career, it didn't resemble the law. It didn't resemble secretarial work. It was something that just didn't excite me. It didn't make me want to go to work. I didn't feel like my quote unquote skills were being used. And I'm sure if I stayed there long enough, I would have found my way. But I don't know. I was always impetuous. I wanted to get at it, so to speak, and I
Mm.
didn't think that that was the right road for me.
So how did you find the right road?
By a lot of mistakes. Some I made, some that were made for me. Um, the big firm thing was never going to work out for me. So I,
Mm.
in talking to people, I said, well, let's go to a smaller place where maybe I can get some more hands-on experience and do something more, what I thought more meaningful, quicker. And I did that, and I worked at a great place and had more of an impact quicker. Um, and then um, the firm went belly up because they lost their largest client to bankruptcy, and there were massive layoffs. And then September 11th happened,
Mm.
and the economy was a mess, and there were no jobs. I mean, not there were no jobs; they were very difficult to find. And once you kind of get off of the big firm track, in my experience, you're off of it. There's no getting back on that train. So, after interviewing and looking around, I said, you know what? Why don't I just do it on my own? Lots
Mm.
of people do it. Why can't I? And quickly found out it's not how it works. You can't just go start practicing law. But when you're
Yeah.
24, 25, 26, whatever I was, you think you could do anything, right? Um,
Yeah.
so quickly realized I didn't know anything, and I needed to learn more. So I was lucky enough to meet probably someone outside of my family that was the greatest impact on my life. Um, his name was Jimmy Maniatis, and I think he was like 78 when I met him. Long story, family friend, local attorney who everyone knew. Um, and I said, "Can I have a job?" And he said, "Job? I don't. 78 years old. I don't have enough work to give you a job." And I said, "All right, fine. Can I just hang out in your office?" you know. And that's what happened. I
Mm.
did a little work for him. I had a few small things on my own, and that's how it got started. And he had the time to dedicate to train me, to educate me, and that's how my career kind of got kicked off the right way.
And I think there was a moment before then, even when you said, and I realized that I had to do something different, right? Because you're right. As a 20 something year old, we think, well, I'm not 20 anymore, but we thought we're invincible. But there comes time where you just have to put in the hard work, and you need the right somebody to steer you in the right direction. So that moment right there is, I realized, must have been pivotal. I want to ask you about something actually. I remember when we had a brief conversation we talked about how big piece of what you do obviously is emotions, dealing with people's emotions as they're going through divorce, but not only the clients, are other people involved, such as other attorneys on the other side. And we talked about angry text, when you receive, because sometimes practitioners take on the emotions of their clients. It's just being human. How do you deal with angry text?
I, personally, I can tell you how I deal with it. I don't know how anyone else deals with it, but what I do,
Mhm.
and Denise, I haven't always done a perfect job of it, right? But what I do is I set a time limit to respond to anything. So when I get a text or an email or a letter from someone, the last thing I do is respond right away. And I've caught myself, right? Like getting that email
Yeah.
and saying, wait a second, start. And I said, just relax. Inevitably, if you let a little time pass, your frame of mind changes. But look, in my line of work, if I even showed you some of the things that I have received from people, and we're talking about seasoned attorneys, 20, 30 years of experience, you're like, how do you put that in writing? So I think if you don't
Mm,
have the ability to take a minute and think it through and
yeah.
say, let me just cool down here, you'll end up doing the same thing. And then where does it go, right? Does it
Yeah.
just keep escalating until
Yeah.
everyone's calling each other bad words? Can.
Yeah. No, that's true. It doesn't resolve anything. And you allowing basically your ego and the the personal part of yourself, to come through, and it shouldn't be personal. And that's really one of the reasons why I started doing this, is just to elevate the humanness. Let's talk about your passion. I know you recently wrote an article that you are very passionate about. Tell me what it is about and why are you so passionate about it?
I recently wrote an article. Um, it's really not just intended to be an article. It's really intended to be something that I'm going to continue to pursue. Um, and it's basically a campaign, so to speak, to end the weaponization of social media inside of divorce cases. And anyone that does what I do knows,
Mm,
not just knows, have seen it happen where, you know, litigants will post things on social media in a divorce, whether it's about their spouse or something that happened with the kids or the judge or the other lawyer. And it's become such an absolute problem. Um, Look, we all know what social media is doing to society in general, right? We all know the good, we all know the bad. But specifically with divorce cases, Nisa, people are right. What's the difference between criminal lawyers and divorce lawyers, right? The old joke. Well, criminal lawyers see bad people at their, you know, best, and divorce lawyers see good people at their worst, right? So you take an
yeah.
incredibly emotional experience, you turn the temperature on, you have these horrible court experiences where people say bad things about you, and then all of a sudden you're at home in front of your computer, and maybe that's the only avenue you have, and you just
Mm,
unleash something, and then it's out and it's forever and it's shared. And my article uh, talks about only in cases that involve children, because I think that the court, and my article argues that the court actually absolutely has the right to prohibit posting when children are involved. And it talks about the two recent appellate division cases that said just that it's not a prohibition of someone's First Amendment right if the order that the court issues is, narrowly tailored and meant to protect
yeah.
children. So, New York State is on this. They're really, really on it. It needs to stop. Kids are being affected. The article goes, into citing other people's research on, the effect of social media on children, depression, anxiety, suicide. Uh, you add to that the fact that children of divorce are already predisposed to depression and suicide. You take the two, you put them together, and you have a real epidemic for kids. So I'm trying to get New York State to issue actual legislation that prohibits disparaging, harmful posting in divorce cases that involve children. outright prohibit, not wait for it to happen and then
Mm,
say don't do it. Um, and I
right.
think there's a good reason and a legal reason that it should be done. And it's appearing in law.com's publishing it next week, and the New York Law Journal is running with it. So I hope everyone reads it, thinks about it, and talks to their local people about it.
That is a wonderful mission because whether we can ever change the fact that, yeah, kids are spending too much time on social media, it is out there, whether we like it or not. But especially when it comes to an incredibly emotional and difficult time like a divorce where kids basically they don't want to be stuck in the middle, and when you put it out there on the internet, it's just you're adding to it, you're definitely adding to it, and then people that have nothing to do with your situation do not understand dynamics of your situation, then they need to spew out their own opinions and their own insecurity, so it is a disaster, and I'm all about protecting children. So good for you, Gus. And as a parent, I am passionate about that too. So we will definitely post a link to the article, below the interview. Now, switching gears a little bit, when you are not working, which I can't even imagine what that looks like, but when you're not working, you have 3 kids, right? What do your weekends look like?
Um, they're great. So I have a daughter who's graduating high school this year, and then a soon to be 14 and soon to be 10-year-old sons. And it's you know like a lot of people, way too many sports, which we love, and they all play. It's funny to say what do people argue about in parenting decisions. I'm like 9 times out of
Yeah,
10, it's whether they play lacrosse or soccer or some other sport. So yeah, so we play a lot of sports. I try really really hard to stay active, uh, fit, working out, and then secret to success: once a week, every Friday, no matter what, my wife and I we go on a date. So that that
love it.
that is that is. Although I've recently read that it should be two per week. That's the secret to success. But we've got one. We've got one under
That's
control,
a
and
good
we've
start.
stuck to it for 20 years. So
I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm glad you mentioned that. That is actually great because you need some time to get away and just to be sort of in your own space to recharge, and yeah, that is great. I hope everybody's listening. That is a great secret. It's so funny because well, you've seen and heard some of these interviews when I ask that question, well, how do you balance it all out and not bring it home? And the favorite answer is, well, I compartmentalize. How?
that's
It's so
hogwash.
it's it's so ingrainedly it's part of you, right? Is what we do. And yes, you don't have to own the emotions, but it's still part of your
You know,
identity. Yeah, you do not
I
want to
I
bring it home,
challenge
but
that. I
there, how
challenge
so?
the compartmentalizing concept. I don't think it's possible. I think, at least for me, um, when I have a difficult problem at work, Lisa, and look, anyone that tells you I know what to do all the time in my line of work is not telling the truth. You don't always know what to do.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes thought. But if you kick around an idea in an office where everyone knows the client, everyone knows the case, everyone knows the problem, you are lacking um, unique insight. So I don't
Hmm.
compartmentalize. I actually talk to my wife about cases all the time. I don't tell her details or names or anything like that. But I said, what if I told you this and this and that? What would you think? And inevitably, and it's in a light way, and you're out to dinner and you're
Right.
relaxing, you're not
Right.
stressing about it. But um, so I actually involve her a little bit more in talking about work a little bit. I think it's unnatural to not talk about work, and I expect her to talk to me about uh, her concerns too. But you get unique perspectives on it. So I mean, you can't go home and have this insane problem where you've seen such hurt and destruction on Friday at 4, and then walk in the door and turn it
Mm,
off. It's just not natural. I think
yeah.
you have to uh, ponder it a little bit.
That makes sense what you're saying. And I do the same. And it doesn't mean that if you are, let's say you are emotionally charged because you've dealt, and I know you deal with very complicated and difficult cases, that then you walk in a door and take it out on
Right.
your family. And maybe that's what some practitioners mean is I don't bring in somebody else's emotion, but as far as brainstorming, bouncing it off conceptually, obviously without keeping things confidential, nothing wrong with that. I think you're right, it's healthy. um what you've had an interesting journey. What advice would you give to incoming lawyers that maybe you wish someone gave you?
Don't just do what you think you're supposed to do. Don't just, plot a course that you think gets you to where you think you want to be and then just follow it like, a straight line. It's just not how it works. Um, and maybe it's not how it's supposed to work, right? So um,
Mm.
everybody wants to be financially comfortable, and everybody wants to have so much saved when they retire, and everybody wants this or that. But I think if you make a few mistakes, Denise, and you take a few right turns when you should have turned left, and vice versa, I think what happens is that the happy mistakes find you where you're supposed to be. Um, it worked for me, and by all means, I'm not saying I'd like to go back and do it again because it was hard. Um, but for young attorneys, there's a lot of ways to be successful in this business. A lot of ways. It's not just one way. So don't be afraid to, take that job that you think, oh, well, it's $20,000 pay cut or whatever. Um, if there's an avenue to explore something that you think you might be good at, that's how you're successful.
Mm. I like the word happy mistakes. I think you said happy mistakes, right? Or
Happy
good
mistakes.
mistakes,
That's
maybe. Happy
right.
mistakes.
How to
Yeah.
justify a mistake
Yeah.
you just made is a happy mistake.
Well, and one that really got you on this trajectory to where you are today, and hopefully wasn't so painful. And yeah, look, we could talk life, career, and so much. So we'll have you back for sure. And thank you so much for sharing your great story.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun.
And for those of you who want to learn more about Gus and his work and how to get hold of him, make sure that you check on his bio link below, as well as the great article that he wrote. And remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Beyond the Bar Podcast. Follow us on all social media channels using the links provided. And until next time, stay curious and inspired.